She walked into the most luxurious restaurant in the city to ask for the leftovers people had abandoned on their plates. She did not know that the man sitting a few meters away was the boy who had promised her, 25 years earlier, that he would come back for her one day. She did not know that he had become a millionaire. She did not know that he owned the very establishment she had just entered. And she did not know that their reunion was about to change several lives forever. Before we begin, remember this. While the story you're about to hear is fictional, the message behind it is very real. At Zara Tales, we believe the right story at the right moment can change a life. That evening, the guests laughed, the crystal glasses caught the light beneath the grand chandeliers, and the waiters moved between the tables carrying dishes that some people barely tasted before abandoning. Serena stood near the entrance for a few seconds, holding a worn fabric bag against her chest. Her shoes were scuffed. Her coat was too thin for the cold. Her hair had lost the shine it once had. Yet despite the visible exhaustion on her face, she carried something calm and dignified about her. She was not holding out her hand for money. She was only watching the nearly full plates that the waiters were preparing to clear. A young employee approached and asked her sharply what she was doing there. Serena lowered her voice slightly and explained that she only wanted to know whether it was possible to take the leftovers that were going to be thrown away. She added that she would leave immediately and would not disturb anyone. The employee looked at her clothes, then at the elegant guests who had already begun to stare. He told her that an establishment of this level was not a welfare center and that she needed to leave. Serena nodded without protest. She had learned that when you no longer had a home, some people stopped seeing a human being and saw only an inconvenient presence. She turned to go, but an older waitress stopped her quietly and murmured that she might be able to prepare a small bag if no one was watching. Serena thanked her with genuine emotion. She explained that the food was not only for herself. 3 children were waiting for her in an abandoned storage room near the train station, and the youngest had eaten nothing since morning. The waitress looked momentarily startled, then glanced around before lifting an untouched plate from a tray. She began quickly transferring the food into a container. But a cold voice rang out behind her. Cassandra, dressed in a brilliant gown and surrounded by several guests, had noticed the scene. She asked why a woman dressed in that manner was standing in the middle of the reception. The waitress tried to explain, but Cassandra did not give her time to finish. She declared that this kind of behavior destroyed the image of the restaurant, and that if they began distributing leftovers to everyone who wandered in off the street, the place would soon be overrun. Serena felt the eyes of the room settle on her. She could have responded, but she simply took a slow breath. She said quietly that she had stolen nothing and had only asked for food that was about to be thrown away. Cassandra looked at her with a contemptuous smile and replied that even leftovers had more value than people who entered a private event without an invitation. Several guests laughed faintly, less because they found it amusing than because it pleased Cassandra. Serena tightened her grip on her bag. The humiliation stung, but she was thinking of the children who were waiting. She asked one last time if she could take the box that had already been prepared. Cassandra took it from the waitress's hands and placed it on a table out of reach. Then she called for security. At the other end of the room, Malcolm was speaking with 2 investors when he noticed the commotion. He had just returned to the city where he had spent the first years of his life. He had not set foot there since his family's departure when he was only 10 years old. In all those years, he had built an enormous company, opened hotels, purchased buildings, and invested in restaurants. His name had become synonymous with success. Yet since his arrival in this city, something in him felt strangely hollow. Walking through the old streets, he had looked for the school of his childhood, the small square where he used to play, and the house next door where Serena had once lived. He had found only transformed buildings, closed shops, and unknown faces. He had wondered what had become of her. Serena had been his first friend, his confidant, the person he had loved most at an age when you do not yet know how to explain love. They shared snacks, secrets, and dreams. When another child mocked Malcolm because his family did not have much money, Serena always stepped in front of him. When Serena's mother came home late from work, Malcolm stayed with her on the front steps so she would not wait alone. They had even buried a small box beneath a tree with a photograph, 2 marbles, a drawing, and a promise written with a child's spelling mistakes. They had sworn to open it together when they were grown. Then one evening, Malcolm's father announced that the whole family was leaving the city the very next morning. Malcolm had barely slept. On the morning of their departure, he had run to Serena's house, but no one answered. He left in front of her door a small pendant made from an old coin with a hole pierced through it and a blue cord. On a scrap of paper, he had written that he would come back. He sent several letters after the move, but no reply ever came. With time, he began to believe that Serena had forgotten him. His studies, his work, and his ambitions had filled his days. Yet he had kept an old photograph of them together in a box that he carried through every move. That evening, when Malcolm saw the security staff approaching the poorly dressed woman near the entrance, he excused himself from his investors and walked toward the scene. Cassandra raised her hand immediately to signal that she had the situation under control. She explained that an unknown woman had entered to take food and that she was having her removed. Malcolm looked at Serena, but her lowered, worn face did not immediately stir his memory. He asked calmly why they did not simply give her a box and let her leave. Cassandra replied that it was not a question of food but of rules and image. She added that a great man like him could not allow just anyone to come and beg in the middle of his guests. Serena then raised her eyes. For a moment, she met Malcolm's gaze. She did not recognize him. The thin, anxious boy of her childhood had become a self-assured man in a perfectly tailored suit. She did not even know his name, because when they were children his family had still used a different form of the name in certain documents. And after his departure, Malcolm had been raised far from everything he had known. Yet there was something familiar in his eyes. Serena looked away quickly, convinced that hunger and fatigue were playing tricks on her. She thanked the waitress who had tried to help her and walked toward the exit. Then the cord of her pendant slipped. From beneath her coat, the old worn coin swung in the light of the chandeliers. Malcolm stopped moving. All the noise around him seemed to disappear. He recognized the irregular mark he had made with a small nail when he had pierced that coin 25 years ago. He even remembered his mother's anger when she discovered he had used a tool without permission. He took a step toward Serena and asked her to wait. His voice had changed. It was no longer the voice of an owner giving an instruction, but the voice of a man suddenly returned to his childhood. Serena turned slowly. Malcolm fixed his eyes on the pendant and asked where she had found it. Serena placed her hand instinctively over it. She replied that it had belonged to her since childhood. A boy had given it to her before leaving the city. She had never seen him again. Malcolm felt his throat tighten. He spoke then a nickname he had not used for 25 years. He called her Sarah, as they had called her when they were children. Serena went pale. No one had called her that since Malcolm's departure. She studied the man's face more carefully, the shape of his eyes, the way he tilted his head slightly when he was waiting for an answer. Her breath stopped. She whispered his name without being able to believe what she was seeing. Malcolm did not respond immediately. He had dreamed of this reunion for a great part of his youth. But in none of his dreams was Serena humiliated and on the verge of being thrown out of his own restaurant. He had imagined she would be happy, surrounded by a family, perhaps married, perhaps the teacher she had once said she wanted to become. He did not know what to do with the pain that was suddenly appearing in his chest. Serena felt the shame overtake the surprise. She did not want Malcolm to see her like this. She had waited years for his return and then stopped waiting in order to survive. Now that he finally stood before her, she would have preferred to be wearing clean clothes, to have a home, to be able to tell him that her life had worked out. She stepped back and told him she had to go. Malcolm tried to stop her but she shook her head. She wanted neither questions nor pity. She left the restaurant quickly, even leaving behind the box of food. Malcolm stood still for a second, then followed her without listening to Cassandra, who was calling after him. Outside, the cold had taken over the streets. Serena was walking fast despite her damaged shoes. Malcolm caught up with her near a crossroads and asked her to stop. She kept going until he told her that he was not trying to humiliate her. She finally turned, her eyes shining. She asked him what he wanted to hear. Did he want to know how the little girl who shared her snacks with him had become a woman asking for the leftovers of the wealthy? Did he want to know where she slept or how many days it had been since she had eaten a real meal? Malcolm absorbed her words without responding. Serena almost immediately regretted them, but she was too wounded to apologize. She told him that she was happy he was alive and that he had succeeded. She told him she had thought of him often but that their lives no longer had anything in common. Malcolm replied that it was not hers to decide in a few minutes. He wanted to understand what had happened to her. Serena smiled sadly. She reminded him they had not seen each other since they were 10 and that he owed her nothing. Malcolm said he was not speaking about debt. He spoke about their friendship, about the letter, about the promise he had left at her door. Serena looked at him with surprise. She had never received his letters. The morning Malcolm left, she had been at the hospital with her mother, who had collapsed during the night. When they returned 2 days later, the rain had soaked the paper left at the door. The pendant had remained caught under a step, but the message had become illegible. Serena had understood that he had left her a gift without knowing what he had written. She had then sent letters to his family's old address, not knowing they would be returned or discarded. Malcolm felt an old wound reopen. For years, each of them had believed that the other had stopped writing. A simple chain of errors had separated two children who had wanted to remain close. He wanted to ask more questions, but Serena suddenly glanced at an old clock above a pharmacy. She startled and said she had to leave immediately. Malcolm asked where she was going. She replied that people were waiting for her. He offered to drive her but she refused. She began walking again. Malcolm followed. Serena asked him to go back to his reception but he continued walking. He had left his guests, his partners, and Cassandra without explanation. Yet nothing seemed more important to him than this woman disappearing into a dark street with an empty bag. After several minutes, Serena understood that he was not going to leave. She agreed to let him accompany her on the condition that he asked no questions in front of the children. Malcolm did not immediately understand which children she meant. They crossed 2 neighborhoods and arrived near the old freight station. Behind an abandoned building was a small storage room whose broken window had been repaired with cardboard. Serena knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked twice more. The door opened to reveal a wary teenager. When she saw Serena, her face relaxed. Then she noticed Malcolm and stepped back. Serena explained that he was an old friend. Inside, Malcolm discovered 3 children and an elderly woman sitting around a small electric heater. The youngest boy was perhaps 6 years old. He asked immediately whether Serena had found something to eat. Serena closed her eyes for a moment, ashamed to have returned empty-handed. She promised him she would go back out to find food. Malcolm then understood that Serena had not been lying at the restaurant. She had not asked for the leftovers only for herself. The elderly woman explained that Serena shared everything she found with all of them. She could have slept somewhere safer on her own, but she refused to leave the children without protection. Malcolm took out his phone and called the restaurant. He asked that several hot meals, drinks, and blankets be prepared. Serena tried to stop him, but he told her gently that he was not doing this to buy her silence or to display his wealth. The children were hungry and the food existed. There was nothing else to discuss. Less than 30 minutes later, a car arrived with several bags. The children nearly threw themselves on the containers, but Serena asked them to sit down and share properly. Malcolm watched her serve everyone before taking a small portion for herself. She knew each person's tastes, allergies, and fears. She gave the most tender piece to the small boy, cut the elderly woman's meat, and kept the least full plate for herself. Malcolm remembered that at school, Serena had always done the same thing. She shared before eating. This was not something poverty had given her. She had always been this way. That thought hurt him even more, because life seemed to have rewarded her generosity with successive losses. Cassandra called Malcolm several times. He finally answered, stepping away slightly so as not to disturb the children. She asked what had possessed him to leave his own event to follow a stranger. Malcolm explained that Serena was not a stranger. Cassandra reminded him that they were expected to announce their engagement soon and that 30 or so journalists present at the restaurant had noticed his departure. Malcolm replied that no date had been announced and that he had never agreed to make their relationship public that evening. Cassandra changed her tone. She asked whether he was really going to ruin an important evening because of a childhood memory. Malcolm told her that the memory had a name and that she had just been humiliated in an establishment that belonged to him. Cassandra said she had only been protecting his image. Malcolm replied that he did not want an image that required refusing food to children. Then he ended the call. Cassandra remained alone in the middle of the restaurant, surrounded by curious looks. For the first time since the beginning of her relationship with Malcolm, she felt that another woman could take a place she had already considered her own. She had known Malcolm for 2 years. Their relationship had begun at a business dinner between their circles. Cassandra was elegant, educated, and accustomed to the same world as him. She knew how to receive guests, speak to investors, and present herself before cameras. Many considered them a perfect couple. Yet Malcolm had never spoken the words she was waiting for. He had given her jewelry, invited her on his travels, and introduced her to his partners. But an invisible distance had always remained between them. Cassandra had always thought this distance would disappear after their marriage. Watching Malcolm run after Serena, she understood it might instead become greater. She asked an employee to tell her everything he had overheard. When she learned that Serena was Malcolm's childhood friend, she forced a smile. In front of the guests, she pretended that Malcolm had simply gone to help someone in difficulty. Inside, a cold unease had begun to grow. She did not fear Serena's appearance, for fatigue and poverty had marked it. She feared what Serena represented. A part of Malcolm she did not know. A life prior to his success. Memories that no fortune could manufacture. Meanwhile, in the abandoned room, Malcolm sat on an overturned crate and watched Serena tell a small story to the youngest child to help him eat slowly. He was discovering a woman very different from those he usually spent time with. Serena was not trying to impress him. She asked no questions about his companies, his houses, or his cars. She even seemed to avoid looking at his suit, as if it represented the distance between them. When she had finished serving everyone, Malcolm approached her. They stood near the door under a dim light. He offered her a room in one of his hotels for the night, as well as rooms for the children and the elderly woman. Serena refused immediately. She explained that certain staff members might call social services and separate the children. Malcolm asked who they were. Serena told him. The teenager, Lena, had fled a violent stepfather. The small boy, Daniel, had lost his mother a few months earlier and had been sleeping on the streets with his older brother who had since disappeared. The third child, Samuel, sometimes worked at the market to buy food. The elderly woman was called Ruth. She had been evicted from her home after a fraud and watched over the children when she could. Serena was the mother of none of them, but she had become the person they called when they were afraid. Malcolm asked why she had not contacted an organization. She replied that she had contacted several. Some had no space. Others had proposed taking the children separately, and Serena was afraid that Lena would be sent back to the family she was fleeing. She knew the situation could not continue, but she was searching for a solution that would not break them further. Malcolm promised to find legal help and a safe housing arrangement. Serena pulled back. She told him he could not come back into her life after 25 years and decide to solve everything with a phone call. Malcolm acknowledged that she was right. He added, however, that having money and contacts was not always a fault. Serena replied that money was not the problem. The problem was the way wealthy people looked at those they helped, as though they became their property. Malcolm asked whether she thought he was like that. She studied him for a long time, then admitted that she no longer knew him well enough to say. Those words reached Malcolm more deeply than an accusation would have. He realized he had spent the evening thinking he was finding Serena again, when in truth the woman before him was no longer only the little girl of his memories. She had lived 25 years without him. She carried wounds, choices, mistakes, and a strength he would have to take time to know. He told her he was not asking her to trust him immediately. He only asked permission to return the following day with someone capable of helping the children without separating them. Serena hesitated. She wanted to refuse in order to protect what remained of her dignity. But she knew the children needed more than a cold storage room and a few containers of food. She agreed, on the condition that she meet this person before any decision was made. Malcolm accepted her terms. Before leaving, he removed his coat and placed it over Serena's shoulders. She tried to return it, but he reminded her that as a child she had given him her scarf one winter when he had forgotten his. Serena smiled for the first time. The smile was tired, but Malcolm recognized immediately the little girl who used to laugh near the school. Something moved inside him. It was not yet love, at least not the adult kind he knew. It was a door opening onto a feeling that had long been locked away. The following morning, Malcolm cancelled 2 important meetings. He called a lawyer specializing in child protection, then the director of an organization he trusted. He insisted that nothing be done without Serena's agreement and that the children not be separated abruptly. His assistant asked why he was getting personally involved. Malcolm replied that he needed to understand before delegating. In truth, he wanted to see Serena again. This thought surprised him. For years, Malcolm had organized his life around precise decisions. He knew why he bought a building, why he refused a contract, why he traveled to a city. With Serena, no commercial logic applied. He simply wanted to know whether she had slept, whether she had eaten, and whether she was still wearing his coat. When he arrived near the storage room, he found her repairing a shoe with thick thread. The children were laughing around her. Serena looked up and appeared surprised that he had kept his word. Malcolm introduced the lawyer and the organization director. The conversation lasted several hours. Temporary solutions were proposed. The organization had a small shelter that could take in Serena, Ruth, and the children together while their situation was examined. Lena would be able to speak with a psychologist without being sent back immediately to her family. Daniel and Samuel would benefit from an official search to find any remaining relatives. Serena asked many questions. She refused anything that seemed dangerous or humiliating. Malcolm watched her defend each child with an energy he had not yet seen in her. By the end, a visit to the shelter was arranged. Serena agreed only after she had inspected the bedrooms, the doors, the kitchen, and the house rules. That same evening, the children left the abandoned room. Daniel held Serena's hand while Lena kept a certain distance, as though she feared that all of this might disappear. Malcolm drove them in a simple vehicle rather than his most expensive car. He did not want to turn the journey into a spectacle. When they arrived, Serena discovered clean beds, a warm bathroom, and a small kitchen. She stood motionless in the doorway of the room they offered her. It had been months since she had slept in a real bed. She ran her hand over the blanket and then turned away to hide her tears. Malcolm pretended not to see them. He knew that certain emotions needed silence. Before leaving, he gave her his personal number. Serena told him she probably would not call. He replied that he knew, but that he wanted her to be able to if she needed to. The following day she did not call. Nor the day after. Malcolm found himself checking his phone between meetings. Cassandra noticed his distraction. She asked how long this crisis of generosity would last. Malcolm said that helping children was not a crisis. Cassandra replied that she was not talking about the children but about Serena. She wanted to know what this woman truly represented for him. Malcolm answered that he did not yet know. That honesty worried her more than a lie would have. She reminded him that they had built plans together and that people around them were expecting an announcement. Malcolm had never accepted the idea that marriage should be treated as a merger between two networks. Cassandra grew angry. She accused him of reconsidering everything because of a woman he had found on the street. Malcolm asked her why Serena's situation bothered her so deeply. Cassandra replied that Serena might use their shared past to manipulate his emotions. Malcolm reminded her that Serena had refused a hotel room, refused money, and refused his help at the very beginning. Cassandra replied that skilled people sometimes refused a little in order to obtain more later. Malcolm looked at her with disappointment. He told her that when she saw a person suffering, she immediately searched for what that person could steal. Cassandra replied that this was how the world worked. Malcolm said that this was perhaps how her world worked, but not his. Their conversation ended on those words. A few days later, Serena finally called Malcolm. It was not for herself. Daniel had developed a high fever and the organization was waiting for an authorization for certain examinations. Malcolm went immediately to the clinic. When he arrived, Serena was sitting beside the child's bed, her hand resting on his forehead. She looked exhausted. Malcolm spoke with the doctor, handled the necessary formalities, and stayed until the fever came down. In the middle of the night, Serena fell asleep for a few minutes on a chair. Malcolm watched her without daring to move. He noticed the small scars on her hands, the shadows under her eyes, and the pendant still hanging at her neck. He wondered how many times she had faced this kind of night alone. When she woke, she was surprised to find him still there. She asked why he had not gone home. Malcolm replied that Daniel was not the only one who should not have to stay alone. Serena lowered her eyes. She thanked him and then added that she was not accustomed to someone staying when they could leave. Malcolm felt that this sentence concealed a much deeper story. He did not ask her to explain it. By early morning, Daniel was doing better. Leaving the clinic, Malcolm proposed that they have breakfast. Serena wanted to refuse, but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet sound. They both laughed, and that simplicity erased some of the distance between them for a few seconds. Malcolm took her to a small old cafe far from the luxurious places he usually frequented. Serena recognized the location. A bakery had once occupied the same spot. They sat near the window and for the first time spoke without urgency. Malcolm told her about the move, the difficult years his family had gone through, the small jobs he had held before creating his first company. Serena was surprised to learn that his success had not been immediate. She had imagined he had grown up in comfort. Malcolm explained that his father had lost his job shortly after their departure and that the family had gone through several very hard years. Serena told him that after her mother's illness, she had often missed school to care for her. Her mother had died when Serena was 17. She had then worked in a canteen and then in several restaurants. She had married a man who seemed kind at first but became violent and took all her savings. She had ended up without a home and without support. Later, she had managed to open a small meal service with a friend. She fed workers and children from the neighborhood, but her former partner had signed debts using her name and then disappeared with the money. Serena had lost her business and her home. Malcolm clenched his jaw listening. He wanted to find everyone who had hurt her, but he knew she was not telling him all this so that he would take revenge. She simply wanted him to understand how a life could break apart slowly without a person ever stopping fighting. He asked why she had never left the city. Serena looked at the street beyond the window. She replied that she had tried twice. Each time, something had brought her back. Her mother was buried here. Her only happy memories were here. And a part of her had long believed that Malcolm might perhaps return. After speaking that last sentence, she seemed to regret her sincerity. Malcolm was quiet. He admitted that he too had searched for her name several times. He had found too many people sharing the same first name and no certain result. Serena asked why he had not returned sooner. Malcolm replied that at first he was a child dependent on his family. Then he had been afraid of discovering that she had forgotten. The more years passed, the more difficult returning became. Serena lowered her head. She understood that fear. They had both let the silence grow because each of them feared what they would find on the other side. From that day on, Malcolm visited the shelter regularly. He did not always come with gifts. Sometimes he brought only bread, helped Samuel with his schoolwork, or played cards with Ruth. Serena noticed that he was making an effort not to control everything. When she told him that a decision belonged to the children or to the organization, he accepted. He asked Serena, however, what she wanted for herself. She replied that she wanted to work in a kitchen again. She did not want to depend indefinitely on others' help. Malcolm offered her a position in one of his restaurants. Serena refused, fearing that the employees would only respect her because she knew the owner. Malcolm then asked her to go through a genuine interview with a manager who did not know their story. Serena agreed. She was hired in a less prestigious kitchen in another part of the city. On her first day, her hands trembled as she tied her apron. It had been a long time since she had worked in a stable environment. She feared she might be too slow. Yet from the very first hours, her gestures became precise again. She knew how to organize the preparation of dishes, avoid waste, and calm tensions between staff. The manager called Malcolm after 1 week to say that Serena was one of the most serious people she had hired in a long time. Malcolm did not pass on the compliment immediately. He waited for Serena to receive the praise on her own terms. He knew she needed to rebuild her confidence without believing that every success came from his influence. Serena began saving part of her salary. She bought new shoes for Daniel before buying anything for herself. Malcolm gently scolded her when he found out. She replied that he had no right to tell her how to spend her first paycheck. He acknowledged that she was right. Their closeness was returning in small touches. They teased each other and recalled memories. They discovered their adult differences. Serena found Malcolm too impatient. Malcolm thought she carried too much responsibility on her own. When they disagreed, neither of them disappeared. They were learning to come back to each other, to explain and to listen. Without realizing it, Malcolm began organizing his trips so that he spent more time in the city. He delegated certain matters to his directors and transformed a suite in his hotel into a temporary office. Cassandra understood that his stay, planned for 2 weeks, might last several months. She came to join him without warning. The evening she arrived, she found Malcolm in a small room at the shelter helping Daniel build a cardboard aeroplane. Serena was preparing soup with Ruth. Cassandra stood at the door, unable to recognize the man she knew. Malcolm usually hated disorder. Yet he had glue on his fingers and was laughing when the aeroplane collapsed. Serena looked up and saw Cassandra. Her smile disappeared. She remembered the humiliation at the restaurant perfectly. Malcolm stood up and asked Cassandra why she had not announced her visit. Cassandra replied that a fiancée did not need an appointment to see the man she was to marry. The word fiancé fell heavily in the room. Serena knew that Malcolm and Cassandra were together, but she had not known a marriage was planned. Malcolm corrected Cassandra immediately. He reminded her that there had been no official proposal. Cassandra smiled and replied that everyone knew it was only a matter of time. Serena looked back down at the pot. She felt a pain she did not want to examine. She had no claim on Malcolm. They had only just found each other again. Yet the thought of seeing him leave with Cassandra tightened something in her chest. Cassandra approached Serena and asked with cold politeness whether her new job was going well. Serena replied simply that it was. Cassandra added that she was glad Malcolm had been able to help her return to a normal life. The word help was spoken as though Serena were a stray animal that had been taken in. Malcolm intervened and clarified that Serena had obtained her position through her own abilities. Cassandra replied that she did not doubt it, but that certain doors opened more easily when a millionaire pushed them. Serena set down the spoon she was holding. She refused to be humiliated a second time. She explained calmly that she had asked Malcolm for neither a job nor a home and that every form of assistance had been discussed with the organization. Cassandra replied that she had no reason to defend herself if she had nothing to reproach herself for. Malcolm asked Cassandra to come with him. In the corridor, he reproached her for what she had said. Cassandra told him she was protecting their relationship. Malcolm asked against what? She replied against a woman who was using guilt and memories to take a place that did not belong to her. Malcolm said that Serena had asked for nothing. Cassandra replied that this was precisely what made her dangerous. Malcolm looked at her as if he were seeing her clearly for the first time. He asked whether she truly believed that love was a battle to possess a person. Cassandra replied that in their world, everything of value attracted envy. Malcolm told her that he was not a possession to be protected. He asked her to go back to the hotel and promised he would speak with her later. Serena had heard part of their exchange. That evening, she became more distant. Malcolm tried to understand, but she told him he needed to sort out his relationship. She did not want to be the cause of a conflict. Malcolm replied that the problems between Cassandra and him had existed before she returned. Serena asked him then why he was still with her. Malcolm found no simple answer. Cassandra had been present during an important period of his career. She knew his habits and shared certain projects with him. Their relationship was not false, but it rested more on comfort, admiration, and the expectations of those around them than on genuine intimacy. Malcolm had never examined this with such clarity before seeing Serena again. He told Serena that he needed to make a decision and that he did not want to lie. Serena replied that this decision must be made without thinking of her. She added that she was not ready to become the refuge of a man who was leaving a woman because he had been shaken by memories. Malcolm understood. She wanted to be chosen for the woman she was, not as a doorway back to his childhood. The days that followed, he stepped back from Serena to think. This absence weighed on him more than he would have imagined. He kept working, but every moment reminded him of something he wanted to tell her. When a chef presented a new menu, he thought of the way Serena avoided waste. When he passed a toy shop, he thought of Daniel. When he saw a blue cord in a window display, he thought of the pendant. He then realized that his feelings were no longer coming only from memories. He loved the way she refused pity. He loved the way she protected the most vulnerable. He loved her courage when she was afraid, her voice when she told the children stories, her rare laughter, her honest silences, and even her tendency to want to carry everything alone. He was not trying to find a little girl. He was falling in love with the woman she had become. This truth frightened him, because it demanded that he change his life rather than simply add Serena to the one he already had. Malcolm asked Cassandra to join him in a private room at the hotel. He explained that he could no longer continue their relationship. Cassandra remained silent for several seconds, then asked if Serena was the reason. Malcolm replied that Serena had only revealed a truth he had refused to look at. He had never loved Cassandra the way she deserved to be loved. Cassandra stood abruptly. She reminded him of everything she had done for him, the events organized, the relationships she had brought, the image she had built alongside him. Malcolm replied that a relationship could not be a list of exchanged services. Cassandra accused him of being ungrateful. She declared that he was destroying years of effort for a woman he had found scraping for leftovers. Malcolm asked her never to speak of Serena that way again. Cassandra understood from his tone that the decision was final. She removed the bracelet he had given her and threw it on the table. Before leaving, she promised he would regret choosing a woman who could never belong to his world. Malcolm replied that he was beginning to wonder whether he still wanted to belong to that world himself. Malcolm did not go to see Serena immediately. He waited a few days, then went to the restaurant where she worked. He remained in the dining room until the end of her shift. Serena came out through the back door and was surprised to find him standing in a light rain. He told her that he had ended his relationship with Cassandra. Serena did not move. She asked why he was coming to tell her this. Malcolm replied that he did not want her to hear it through the news. Serena asked again whether he had left because of her. He replied that he had left because he had finally understood that he could not build a life on habit and appearance. Serena told him he needed time before beginning something else. Malcolm agreed. He asked for nothing. He only suggested that they walk a little. They walked in the rain until they reached the old neighborhood of their childhood. Malcolm had found the spot where the tree was under which they had buried their box. The land had been abandoned, enclosed by an old fence. They slipped through a gap and searched for a long time. The tree still stood, larger now and leaning toward a building. Malcolm had brought a small spade. Serena laughed seeing him dig in his suit. After several attempts, they touched a rusted metal box. The lid resisted, then gave way. Inside, the water had destroyed part of the objects, but the drawing and the photograph were still recognizable. They also found the childhood promise written on a folded sheet. The words were almost faded, but one sentence remained legible. They had written that they would find each other again even if they became old and different. Serena began to cry. Malcolm did not try to stop her tears. He stayed close to her, and she gently rested her head against his shoulder. For the first time since their reunion, she allowed him to take her in his arms. Malcolm felt that he could have remained like that for hours. He murmured that he was sorry it had taken him so long to come back. Serena replied that they had both returned as soon as they had finally found the courage. When they drew apart, their faces remained close. Malcolm wanted to kiss her, but he stopped himself. He did not want to turn this moment into a decision made under the weight of memories. Serena noticed his hesitation and was grateful for it. They left the field together, carrying the box. Neither of them knew that a few meters away, in a car parked across the street, someone had been photographing them. Cassandra had begun preparing her revenge. She did not only want to win Malcolm back. She wanted to destroy Serena's image before the public could come to love her. 2 days later, a video taken during the restaurant opening appeared on several networks. It showed Serena asking for the leftovers, then leaving the establishment followed by Malcolm. The editing cut out Cassandra's humiliating words and gave the impression that Serena had let herself into the premises after recognizing the millionaire. A headline accused a homeless woman of using an old relationship to seduce a wealthy man. Within a few hours, the images had been shared thousands of times. Journalists appeared in front of the restaurant where Serena worked. Some customers filmed her without permission. Her manager, despite her respect for her, asked her to stay home for a few days to avoid the disorder. When Serena left through the back door, she found several people waiting for her. They asked cruel questions. One asked how much money Malcolm had already given her. Another asked whether she planned to marry him so she would never have to return to the streets. Serena tried to leave but the cameras followed her. Suddenly, a man blocked her path and held up an envelope. He claimed to possess documents proving that Serena had lied to Malcolm about her past and that she was not the victim she presented herself as. Serena recognized this man. The color drained from her face. It was Victor, the former business partner who had used her name to contract debts, emptied the accounts of their small company, and disappeared, leaving her alone to face the creditors. He had come back at the worst possible moment. And behind him, in a car with dark windows, Cassandra watched the scene with a cold smile. Serena stood motionless before the man who had just appeared amid the cameras. She knew that look, that way of smiling as if everything already belonged to him. For years she had imagined the moment she would see him again. She had thought she would shout, demand explanations, or call the police immediately. But in that instant, surrounded by journalists waiting for the slightest gesture to turn into a scandal, she felt only an immense tiredness. Victor held the envelope toward the cameras and claimed that Serena had not told the whole story. According to him, she was not a generous woman who had fallen victim to bad luck, but a manipulator who had deliberately brought about the failure of their business before disappearing with part of the money. Serena opened her mouth to respond, but several voices drowned hers out. Journalists asked whether she had lied to Malcolm, whether she had a criminal record, whether she had organized their meeting at the restaurant, and whether she had kept the pendant simply to attract his attention. Victor took advantage of the confusion to add that Serena had known for several weeks that Malcolm was returning to the city and had prepared the whole scene. It was false, but every lie was spoken with enough assurance to seem credible. Serena stepped back, looking for a way out through the crowd. A camera knocked into her shoulder. Someone tried to grab her pendant to film it more closely. She pushed the hand away by reflex, which provoked new shouting. A voice claimed she was becoming violent. Serena felt the air leave her. Everything she had rebuilt in recent weeks seemed to be collapsing in seconds. She thought of the children at the shelter, of her work which she risked losing, and of Malcolm who would see this scene through the news. She wondered whether he would still believe her when he saw the documents. Victor stepped close and murmured, low enough that the cameras could not hear, that she should have stayed invisible. Serena recognized in his words a threat. Before she could react, a vehicle stopped sharply near the pavement. Malcolm got out accompanied by his assistant and 2 security agents. He crossed the group without slowing and placed himself in front of Serena. He did not immediately ask what had happened. He saw her pale face, her trembling hands, and the cameras too close. He calmly ordered the journalists to step back, then removed his jacket and placed it over Serena's shoulders, just as he had done on the evening of their reunion. Victor tried to present himself as a witness come to reveal the truth, but Malcolm cut him off. He told him to hand the envelope to his lawyer and to stay away from Serena. Victor smiled and replied that Malcolm was blinded by his feelings. He said that the evidence spoke for itself. Malcolm told him that real evidence did not need to be sold in front of cameras. He added that an investigation had already been opened into the disappearance of the money from Serena's business and that several signatures appeared to have been forged. Victor's smile vanished for a fraction of a second. That reaction was enough for Serena to understand that Malcolm had already begun investigating without telling her. Victor tried to regain control by declaring that Malcolm was using his wealth to smother a matter. Malcolm replied that he would smother nothing, that he would hand every document to the authorities and accept whatever conclusions emerged. Then he took Serena gently by the arm and led her toward the car. The journalists were still shouting questions. One asked Malcolm whether he was in love with her. Malcolm stopped for a second. Serena held her breath. He could have avoided the question, protected his image, or said that Serena was simply an old friend. Instead he looked at the cameras and replied that he cared deeply for her, but that this moment was above all about a woman who was being hunted and humiliated without having been given the possibility of defending herself. He added that if the journalists truly wanted the truth, they should wait for the facts instead of turning her suffering into a spectacle. He did not publicly declare his love, because he knew Serena did not need another man to speak on her behalf. But he did not distance himself to protect himself either. Once in the car, Serena was silent. Malcolm asked the driver to move without a set destination so that she could breathe. She watched the city passing behind the window, then asked him how long he had been investigating Victor. Malcolm explained that after hearing her story he had asked a lawyer to check the old files. He had said nothing because he had not wanted to give her false hope before he had solid elements. Serena gently reproached him for having acted without her agreement. Malcolm acknowledged the error. He told her he had wanted to help but understood that the matter was hers before it was anyone else's. Serena considered this. He was not trying to justify himself. He was simply accepting that he had overstepped a boundary. That calmed her a little. She admitted to him that Victor perhaps possessed documents that genuinely bore her signature, because at the time she had trusted him and sometimes signed papers without the means to pay a lawyer. She feared that this carelessness might be enough to make her look guilty. Malcolm replied that a mistake did not make her a criminal and that he would seek the truth without inventing it. Serena asked who had sent the video to the public. Malcolm said he had an idea but did not want to accuse without proof. Serena spoke Cassandra's name. Malcolm did not respond, which confirmed her suspicion. While the car moved away, Cassandra slipped discreetly from the scene. She had hoped that Malcolm would hesitate on discovering Victor and his documents. She believed that a man accustomed to protecting his reputation would immediately distance himself from a woman surrounded by accusations. Instead, he had placed himself in front of Serena without even asking what she had done. Cassandra did not understand that this was not blind trust. Malcolm already knew certain evidence and simply wanted Serena to receive the same dignity that any wealthy person would have been given. Cassandra called Victor and reproached him for having lost control of the scene. Victor replied that he had followed her instructions and that he now wanted the rest of the promised money. Cassandra refused to pay until Serena was definitively discredited. Victor reminded her that he possessed their messages and could reveal that she had contacted him. Cassandra accused him of threatening her. Victor replied that he was threatening no one, only protecting his own interests. For the first time, Cassandra understood that this man was as dangerous to her as to Serena. She arranged to meet him that evening in a private car park to recover all the documents. She thought she could frighten him with her own contacts, but Victor had already prepared another strategy. He no longer simply wanted to receive Cassandra's money. After seeing the journalists and understanding the importance of the story, he wanted to sell the documents to the highest bidder and perhaps blackmail Malcolm. When Cassandra arrived, Victor's recording device was already running inside his jacket. He wanted to record Cassandra admitting that she had paid him. Cassandra arrived with 2 men to intimidate him. She demanded the documents and the messages. Victor asked first for the rest of the money. Cassandra refused and declared that he had not managed to discredit Serena. Victor replied that her mistake had been to underestimate Malcolm's feelings. He added that she should have understood that a man who found his childhood love again would not behave like an investor facing a bad contract. Cassandra ordered him not to use that word. For her, Serena was not Malcolm's love, only a memory he would grow tired of. Victor laughed and asked why she had spent so much money trying to make her disappear, then. Cassandra, carried away by anger, admitted that she had asked him to make Serena untrustworthy, to make her lose her job, and to push Malcolm to abandon her. She specified that she had never asked for violence. Victor knew he had obtained what he wanted. He handed Cassandra an envelope containing only useless copies, then left the car park. Cassandra understood too late that he had recorded her. She ordered her 2 men to follow him, but Victor knew the building's exits better than they did. He disappeared with the recording. The following day, he contacted Malcolm and offered to sell him the proof against Cassandra as well as the original documents from Serena's business. Malcolm refused to pay. He told him that extortion did not become acceptable simply because the evidence might help Serena. Victor then threatened to destroy everything. Malcolm replied that he had already transmitted the call to the investigators and that Victor had just added a new offense to his file. Victor hung up in a panic. He tried to leave the city, but the authorities stopped him at the train station. In his bag they found several original contracts, bank statements, and the device containing the recording of Cassandra. The documents showed that Victor had transferred the money into personal accounts before forging certain signatures. Other papers proved that he had deliberately used Serena's identity to assign her the debts. Serena was not entirely free of all administrative responsibility, because she had signed certain documents without reading them and had avoided several summons. But she had neither stolen the money nor organized the failure of the business. She was a victim of fraud. When a lawyer told her that the most serious charges would be dropped, Serena remained silent for several seconds. Then she sat down and wept. She did not cry only from relief. She cried for the years during which she had believed her life was permanently destroyed by her own mistakes. Malcolm sat beside her without touching her until she took his hand herself. She thanked him for having believed in her. Malcolm replied that he had not believed blindly. He had looked at the person she was, listened to the facts, and refused to let the noise replace the truth. Serena said that very few people had done this for her. Malcolm replied that he wanted to be someone who stayed but knew he would need to prove it for a long time. The arrest of Victor quickly led to the opening of an investigation into Cassandra. The payments, the messages, and the recording established that she had organized the campaign meant to humiliate Serena. Cassandra first tried to deny it. She claimed the money corresponded to a private research service and that she had only been trying to protect Malcolm from a possible fraud. But her own recorded voice contradicted this version. The news spread through the media. The same people who had accused Serena began turning their interest toward Cassandra. Invitations were cancelled. Several partners kept their distance. Her family asked her to leave the city temporarily to avoid a larger scandal. Cassandra refused. She remained convinced that she could win Malcolm back if she spoke with him alone. She presented herself one evening at his hotel and demanded to see him. Malcolm accepted one last conversation in a supervised room. Cassandra entered without makeup, her face marked by several sleepless nights. She told him she had acted out of fear of losing him. Malcolm replied that fear could explain a mistake, but not weeks of lies and humiliation. Cassandra insisted that she loved him and had built her life around their future. Malcolm asked whether she could call love a relationship in which she tried to destroy every person capable of receiving his affection. Cassandra accused him of forgetting everything they had shared. Malcolm said he was not forgetting, but that their good moments could not erase what she had done to Serena. Cassandra asked whether he was really going to marry a former homeless woman. Malcolm looked at her with deep sadness. He explained that she continued to see only a label. Serena was not a homeless woman he had chosen over a wealthy one. She was a courageous person who had lost her home without losing her humanity. Cassandra, despite all her privileges, had chosen to wound someone out of fear of sharing a man's attention. He added that he did not yet know what the future held with Serena, but that he knew he would never return to Cassandra. She understood that everything was finished. Before leaving, she asked him whether he could have loved her more if Serena had never returned. Malcolm replied that he might have continued their relationship longer, but that a relationship built on an illusion always ended by breaking apart. Cassandra left the hotel without adding a word. Later, she was sentenced to a suspended term, financial damages, and community service. Serena did not ask for a harsher punishment. She only wanted Cassandra to be compelled to face the human consequences of her actions. In her community service, Cassandra was assigned to an organization helping women who had lost their homes. The first days, she remained cold and absent. But as the weeks passed, she met people who had been evicted after illness, separation, fraud, or loss of employment. She began slowly to understand that poverty was not a character flaw. This transformation was neither rapid nor complete. She did not suddenly become Serena's friend. Yet several months later, she sent her a letter of apology without asking for a response. Serena read it, put it away, and decided not to carry someone else's anger forever. She did not fully forgive, but she chose to continue her life. Once the scandal was over, Malcolm and Serena could finally find each other away from the cameras. Malcolm did not want their relationship to begin in the excitement of a public victory. He continued to stay in the city but gradually resumed his work. Serena continued her job and followed a kitchen management training program. With the help of the organization, she found a small apartment. The day she received the keys, she stood for a long time outside the door without going in. For months she had slept in places from which she could have been chased at any moment. Having a key that was hers seemed almost unreal. Malcolm wanted to buy her furniture, but Serena only accepted a small table they chose together at a second-hand market. She wanted to build her home slowly with her own means. The shelter children came to help her paint the walls. Daniel knocked over a pot. Samuel assembled a shelf upside down. Lena drew a small star near the window. Malcolm spent the whole day with them. That evening, when the children had gone, Serena and Malcolm ate on the floor because there were not yet any chairs. They shared a simple dish in the light of a small lamp. Malcolm told her this seemed more precious to him than any of the organized dinners in his hotels. Serena asked whether he was only saying that to charm her. He replied that he was indeed trying to charm her but was also telling the truth. She laughed, then her expression became more serious. She admitted that she often thought about what a relationship with him might mean. She feared his world, the journalists, the difference in wealth, and the people who would say she was with him out of interest. Malcolm replied that these difficulties were real and he did not want to minimize them. He proposed that they announce nothing, rush nothing, and build something that would belong to them before belonging to the public. Serena asked what he expected of her. Malcolm replied that he wanted to learn to know her without any role to play, to spend time with her, to accept her limits, and to see whether they could love each other in real life and not only in their memories. Serena was silent, then asked him to close his eyes. Malcolm obeyed. She took the old pendant from beneath her blouse, removed the worn cord, and asked him to help her put it back on. Malcolm had bought a blue cord similar to the old one but had never dared offer it. He took it from his pocket. Serena smiled when she understood that he had been carrying it with him for several days. Malcolm replaced the cord without touching the old coin. When he had finished, Serena placed a hand on his cheek and kissed him gently. This kiss had nothing of a return to childhood. It belonged to two adults who now knew each other's wounds and chose, despite everything, to move forward together. Their relationship grew without hurry. Malcolm learned that Serena liked to wake early, detested flowers with too strong a scent, and talked in her sleep when she was worried. Serena discovered that Malcolm overworked when he was afraid, that he kept certain worn clothes from his difficult years, and that he disliked large celebrations despite his ease at attending them. They also had conflicts. Malcolm one day tried discreetly to settle an old debt of Serena's. When she found out, she grew angry. She explained that she wanted to face what was hers and that he needed to stop believing that love meant removing every difficulty. Malcolm acknowledged that he had been acting on reflex. They established precise rules. He could offer help but could not decide alone. Serena, for her part, needed to stop hiding her problems until she reached exhaustion. She learned to ask for support without believing she was losing her dignity. Several months passed. Lena was placed with a specialized foster family who agreed to let her remain close to Serena. Daniel found a maternal uncle who had not known what had happened to him and who agreed to follow a support program before taking him in. Samuel joined a school program and continued to visit Serena every week. Ruth obtained suitable accommodation. The small community formed in the abandoned storage room did not disappear. It simply changed shape. Serena continued to gather everyone around a meal every Sunday. Malcolm joined when he was in the city, and when he traveled he called at the end of dinner. Serena completed her training and became kitchen manager. She developed a system to recover still usable food from several restaurants and distribute it to organizations. Malcolm offered to extend the project to his establishments but insisted that Serena keep the direction. She created an independent organization with a board made up of social workers, cooks, and people who had experienced homelessness. She refused to name the project after Malcolm or after herself. She called it the Open Table, because she wanted no person to be humiliated when they asked for something to eat. The first location was installed in part of the restaurant where their reunion had taken place. The room once reserved for private receptions became a solidarity kitchen during the day. Some wealthy people criticized the decision, but many customers supported the initiative. The restaurant even received more reservations, not because of a calculated campaign but because the public wanted to support a business that had recognized a mistake and changed its practices. The waitress who had tried to help Serena on the first evening was named responsible for the fight against food waste. The young employee who had first tried to turn her away followed a training course and offered sincere apologies. Serena did not seek to humiliate him. She only explained to him that she wanted him to remember that a poorly dressed person could be a mother, a former employee, a neighbor, or the childhood love of someone. Above all, they could be a human being, even if no wealthy person knew them. 1 year after their reunion, Malcolm took Serena to the old field from their childhood. In the meantime, he had bought the land, but he had built neither a hotel nor a luxury building on it. With Serena's agreement and that of the local residents, the place had become a community garden around the old tree. Benches had been installed, a small playground, and an outdoor kitchen used during food distributions. Serena thought she was coming to celebrate the anniversary of the open table. The children, Ruth, the employees, and several residents were all present. Malcolm seemed strangely nervous. Serena noticed but thought he must be preparing to give a speech. After the meal, Daniel asked everyone to gather around the tree. Lena brought the old metal box they had found buried in the earth. Malcolm opened it and took out the childhood promise preserved behind a transparent cover. He reminded them that at 10 years old, Serena and he had written that they would find each other again even if they became old and different. He explained that they had kept that promise without knowing how much time, pain, and courage would be required. Then he looked at Serena and told her he had first believed he loved her because she reminded him of the best of his childhood. But watching her rebuild her life, defend the children, return to work, and refuse to lose her dignity, he had understood that he had fallen in love with her a second time. This time, he loved the whole woman, her past, her wounds, her strengths, and her fears. He added that he did not want to save her or possess her. He wanted to walk beside her, to listen even when he disagreed, to support her projects, and to build a home where neither of them would be afraid of being abandoned. Malcolm then knelt and took out a simple ring accompanied by a small pierced coin similar to the one on the pendant. He asked her to become his wife. Serena brought her hands to her face. For several seconds she could not speak. She looked at the children, at the old tree, at the box, and at the man who had finally kept his promise to return. Then she replied that she was not saying yes to the little boy she had waited for, nor to the millionaire the world admired. She was saying yes to the man who had learned to stay without deciding on her behalf, to ask for forgiveness when he was wrong, and to love without using his fortune as an answer to everything. She accepted. The children shouted with joy. Ruth wept openly. Malcolm stood and slipped the ring onto her finger before kissing her beneath the tree where their story had begun. They decided to hold the wedding in that same garden. Several people suggested luxurious venues, celebrated hotels, and ceremonies designed for magazines. Serena and Malcolm refused. They wanted a wedding surrounded by the people who had accompanied their rebuilding. Serena chose an elegant but simple dress made by a seamstress from the neighborhood. Lena helped her get ready and fastened the old pendant around her neck. Ruth gave her a small handkerchief that had belonged to her mother. Daniel and Samuel carried the rings. Malcolm arrived without a grand procession, dressed in a dark suit whose inside pocket held the original piece of the old blue cord. The garden was decorated with flowers grown by the residents. Tables had been placed under the trees and the meal was prepared by the teams of the open table with products offered by several markets. No one was seated according to wealth or importance. Business owners sat near people who had once been homeless. The invited journalists left their cameras at the entrance. The children occupied the front places. When Serena walked toward Malcolm, he no longer saw the exhausted woman who had asked for the leftovers in his restaurant. He saw the person who had crossed losses, humiliations, and fear without letting cruelty enter her heart. Serena no longer saw only the boy who had disappeared from her life, nor the millionaire surrounded by luxury. She saw the man who had come back, who had chosen to stay, and who had accepted to change in order to build a relationship worthy of them both. During their vows, Malcolm promised that he would never again let silence decide their future. He promised to speak when he was afraid, to listen when she set a boundary, and never to confuse protection with control. Serena promised that she would no longer flee alone when she was ashamed or afraid of being a burden. She promised to open the door of her difficulties to him, not only that of her joys, and to remember that loving someone did not mean becoming weak before them. When they exchanged their rings, a light rain began to fall. No one ran for shelter. The guests laughed. The children danced in the drops. Serena looked up at Malcolm and reminded him that rain had once erased his message at her door. Malcolm replied that it could no longer erase what had just been said before everyone they loved. They kissed while applause filled the garden. After their marriage, Serena did not leave her work to become simply the wife of a wealthy man. She developed the Open Table across several cities with local teams and training programs for people seeking to find work again. Malcolm financed certain installations, but the organization kept its independence. Serena insisted that every person received be called by their name, served at the table, and listened to without judgment. She said that a meal fed the body, but that the way it was given could either repair or humiliate. Malcolm transformed the rules of his businesses. Food that went unserved was redistributed. Staff received training to welcome vulnerable people, and several hotels reserved temporary rooms for families facing emergencies. He did not do this to improve his image. He had understood that a company revealed its values by the way it treated those who could buy nothing from it. Serena returned one day to stand in front of the restaurant where she had asked for leftovers. She stood near the entrance for a few minutes, watching a woman in difficulty receive a warm box and an address where she could find help. No one chased her away. No one filmed her. Serena felt a deep emotion. Malcolm joined her and took her hand. She told him that she often thought about the person she had been that evening, exhausted, hungry, and convinced that her life no longer had any value. She would have liked to go back in time and tell herself to hold on a little longer. Malcolm replied that even before he had recognized her, she had already had value. Serena smiled. That was the most important lesson of their story. She had not become worthy because a millionaire had loved her. She had always been worthy. Malcolm's love had not created her value. It had only learned to see it and to respect it. Some years later, their marriage remained solid. Not because they never encountered difficulties, but because they had learned never again to let fear, money, or silence speak in their place. They returned every year beneath the old tree to open the box and add a new object. A photograph from the wedding, the first badge of the Open Table, a drawing from Daniel, a letter from Lena, and a small key representing Serena's first apartment joined the childhood memories. Their story had not erased the lost years. It had given them a new meaning. Malcolm had left the city at 10 years old promising to return. He had returned 25 years later without knowing that the person he was looking for would walk into his own restaurant to ask for the leftovers. Serena had believed this moment would be the definitive humiliation of her life. It became the beginning of her rebuilding, not thanks to an easy miracle, but thanks to the courage to accept help, to defend the truth, and to let love come back slowly. The lesson of this story is that the value of a person never depends on their clothes, their bank account, their home, or the way others look at them. A person can lose everything without losing their dignity, while another can have plenty and lack all humanity. Sincere love does not consist of saving someone in order to feel powerful. It consists of staying, listening, respecting limits, and helping the other person rise without stealing their freedom. Malcolm and Serena had lost each other as children, but they found each other again when they were finally capable of building an adult love founded not only on their memories, but also on truth, patience, and respect. Let us never forget that before judging a person who asks for food or for help, we must remember that they carry a story we do not know. They may have been betrayed, ill, abandoned, or simply struck by a succession of hardships. Kindness sometimes costs very little, but it can change an entire life. Thank you for watching this story on Zara Tales. If it moved you, like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this one.